Hello and welcome back. In this video, we're going to take a look at the version of software we're going to be using in the database course and how and what it is basically. So the specific software we're going to be using is called MySQL. Okay, some people pronounce this MySQL, but it's MySQL. And MySQL is an open source, insanely popular database that we can use. And one of the reasons that it's so popular is, well, it's old. It's been around for a long time. It was originally built, I think, I can't remember what year it was built, but it has been purchased, I think in 2008 or somewhere around there, by Oracle, who is another database. The number one database is Oracle, and then next down is MySQL, which is also owned by Oracle. Now, MySQL is what's known as a relational database, and a relational database is structured such that it is tables and columns and rows, and that's the way that the data is structured. And it also means that you relate one table to another via a foreign key. So you have information in one table that may relate the specific data to a data in another table. For example, if you have a user of a website who purchases something in your shopping cart, you would have your orders in one table and your users in another table, and your orders would have a user ID so that you knew what user created that order in that table. So that is a relational database. Now, there are other types of databases besides relational database. Probably the most popular database that's not a relational database is called Mongodb, and this is a style of database where it's an object-oriented database where basically they create an object document, and they store data in a very similar to format to like JSON would be stored. We haven't really talked about JSON yet, so don't worry about that if you haven't heard, but it's basically everything's stored in a document, and you would put like your user and your orders possibly in the same document, and that would all be stored together. But we're going to be focusing on relational databases. I think it's a little bit easier to wrap your head around a relational database. They're also insanely powerful, they're fast, and there are benefits of using MongoDB, but in our use case, we're going to be using MySQL and relational databases. Now, the SQL part of the database, SQL is short, it's an acronym for Structured Query Language. Now, there are a lot of SQL databases. For example, Oracle, Microsoft has a version called MS SQL. There is a Postgres SQL, there's SQLite, and of course MySQL, there's also MariaDB. So there are a lot of SQL databases. Now, what is SQL? SQL is a structured query language that's very similar. It is kind of codified or whatever, like where it should be the same, but there are some variations between the different databases on the language itself. But it's a very similar language across all of the SQL databases, and it's very human readable. For example, let me switch over to my screen real quick, and I'm just going to give you an example of what it looks like. So let's say I wanted to update some data in a table. It would look like this. I would type update, and then I would put in the table name. So I'd say update users, and I would say set, and I could say first name equal to Curtis, where ID is equal to 1. So this right here, this is an example of a structured query language statement, an SQL statement. And the structured query language basically allows us to interact with or manipulate our database. So we are going to use language that looks a lot like this. to interact with, get information from, and save information to, or delete information from our database. So we're not going to dive into exactly the syntax yet, but update is a command in SQL, and it's just human readable, update. And what are we updating? We're updating our table called users. We're setting a column called first name, and we're going to set that value equal to Curtis, where the ID is equal to 1. So this is, you don't have to understand this yet, but you can probably read this. It's very human readable, and this is going to be as complex basically as it gets. There's other ones if I want to create tables, delete tables, add rows, whatever. There's all sorts of different commands that we're going to learn throughout this course, but this is what SQL is, and that's what the SQL part of MySQL. It lets you know that it is a structured query language database, and we're going to interact with it by typing commands like this. Now, so that covers what SQL is. MySQL is just a free and open source software that we can use for free. It's very popular. It's used on a lot of different websites. In fact, when Facebook first was built, it was ran on MySQL. And so it is probably one of the most popular databases, and it's definitely probably the most popular for building your own websites. And if you just get like a hosting package with like a shared hosting account or something like that, you're going to have access to MySQL. So it's something that's going to work on pretty much every server. It's going to be installed by default on most servers that you purchase. So it's just going to be readily available. It's super easy to use, and believe it or not, we've already installed it on our computer. So let's just make sure that you have that. And in fact, let me just clear this out here. So I got my terminal open here, and I'm just going to type in sudo opt lamp, and I'm on Linux here, so this is a command for that. And I'm going to start examp, put in my password, and you can see that when you run it, before we were using Apache to run PHP, but also MySQL is also running. So MySQL is installed and ready for us to use on our system if we run this examp server. So this already has MySQL, and so if you have this installed, you're ready to go with the rest of the course. And we're going to start in the next course actually writing some structured query languages and creating our first databases. And so I will see you in the next video where we are going to dive right in and get going. Trust me, this isn't going to be that complex, guys. We're going to cover a few concepts that might be a little difficult, but for the most part, we're going to keep it simple. And again, we're just trying to lay the groundwork so you understand roughly what a database is and how to interact with it. But we're going to be doing this so much throughout the rest of the course that, again, just get the idea, understand basically how it works, and you're not going to be a pro after this chapter, but you're going to be well on your way to be able to build your own websites using databases as well to store your information. So I'll see you in the next video.